Hello everyone, my name's Ernie. Today I'm going to be discussing the book Algorithms, Blockchains, and Cryptocurrencies, Implications for the Future of the Workplace by Gavin Brown and Richard Whittle, published in 2020. I chose this book because I wanted to understand how AI, cryptocurrency, and blockchains are changing the way we work, and when we enter the workforce, how it's going to change us in a way, how it's going to change our everyday experience. So I wanted to know how these three things affected our work because it is changing very rapidly. This book examines how algorithms, blockchains, and cryptocurrency are reshaping how we work. Authors Brown and Whittle argue that these three technologies are reshaping how companies operate, how employees are managed, and how they are paid. In discussing how these three things affect our work, we must examine what they are and what we mean when we mention them. First, algorithms are essentially sets of precise instructions, the foundations of automation and artificial intelligence. They make it possible for machines to learn from data and decide and solve problems, according to an organizational article I read online. They turn everyday human processes into codified, repeatable steps. Think of them as recipes and cleaning routines for computer programs and financial transactions. So when discussing how algorithms change our everyday workplace, we need to discuss what algorithms do. And based on what I read, algorithms' main objective is to analyze. And so what these algorithms are doing is analyzing how to make our jobs easier. And they do this by separating them into microtasks. And these microtasks are human jobs and human work things that can be separated into jobs that take minutes. So it's analyzing what can be made easier and what can be made automated, and what can a human do and what could a machine do. And once it decides that, it separates these tasks into these menial, easier tasks by giving part of the job to the machine and part of the job to the human. And what it does, it makes the company more efficient and it costs less for the human, and just allows for a more efficient company. And what these authors did was they called it bitwork, where it's humans complete small digital tasks instead of these full-time roles. I read a BBC article pertaining to algorithms and how we use algorithms in our day-to-day job experience, but we really don't have any idea how these algorithms are making these decisions. And so when somebody gets fired or something happens, the person often wonders, what happened? And what we've come to realize is some of these algorithms can perhaps be biased. And an example the BBC article gives is a compass software used by U.S. judges and parole officers to rate a person's risk of reoffending or breaking the law. And in 2016, a ProPublica investigation showed the algorithm was heavily discriminatory, incorrectly classifying black people as higher risk 45% of the time compared with white people, according to this article. So it shows us that, yes, these algorithms can possibly help us in ways, but there are other ways that these algorithms can affect us that we don't really know because we aren't looking deeply into these decision-making processes. The next one we must understand is a blockchain. According to a peer-reviewed article I read online, a blockchain can be understood as a chronological database of transactions recorded by a network of computers. It's basically a secure, shared digital ledger where every transaction is linked to the previous one using cryptography. Based on what I read, what blockchains do is essentially change the way data is stored with these ledgers. So what this does is that it can actually make it more transparent for the worker. So these blockchains record every transaction that is made both publicly, and it makes it permanent as well, these transactions. And workers can now see and verify when and how they've been paid. And they can also see how their contracts are managed, and they can see what agreements exist. So these things can reduce the exploitations of perhaps a manager to an employee, because these decisions and contracts are now made more on a math and code basis compared to the emotions that might come along in the workplace. Based on this Brookings article I read, U.S. states are starting to implement blockchain into their everyday lives. So for instance, California is using it to digitize 42 million car titles and detect fraud. West Virginia piloted a blockchain-enabled mobile application for military voting abroad. Austin is using it for homeless ID and information storage, and Baltimore is tracking vacant properties with it as well. But with this, since I mentioned earlier, blockchain, the records cannot be altered or deleted, they're permanent. Um, this may conflict with privacy laws because privacy laws require the right to deletion in some cases. So, without clear national regulations, local projects can face legal uncertainty. The last one we will discuss is cryptocurrency, and based on what I read, it has a lot to do with how we get paid. According to another peer review article, cryptocurrency is a method of constituting virtual coins and providing for their secure ownership and transaction using a cryptographic problem. Basically, they are currencies that allow peer to peer transaction without banks or governments and rely on blockchain to establish trust through transparency and cryptography. So, the last thing I'd like to talk about before my conclusion is a thing that's going on right now with the government and a statement that was released by the Department of Labor. So what's happening is they're deciding whether it's a safe option for people to invest their or investors to invest 401ks into cryptocurrencies. And earlier in 2022, they advised against it, but recently they just rescinded that advisement and are taking a neutral approach to whether or not investors should invest into cryptocurrencies with people's 401ks. So the last thing the authors described that would change the workplace is cryptocurrency. So they envisioned a world where cryptocurrency is paid to employees and it's paid instantly without banks and it's paid globally. So the workers would complete the micro task that I mentioned earlier that the algorithms would see and separate into micro tasks and then get paid instantly based on the social contracts through the blockchains, if that all makes sense to where it's all tying together. So they envisioned a world where we would be completing these micro tasks and be getting paid through cryptocurrency anywhere in the world. They described what would be called a work down effect, to where a lot of workers could perhaps be working for the same jobs, and this demand for the same job would actually decrease the pay of the workers. So there's that, and the power of the work would go more towards the workers because there'd be less middleman through these social contracts, through the or through the blockchains. So as you can see, this is how the three things tie together for how our work is going to change through algorithms, blockchains, and cryptocurrencies. Thank you for watching, guys. Here is one of the authors of my book speaking briefly on cryptocurrency and smart contracts.
I think that cryptocurrency is sort of slightly misleading because as a term, because a lot of them aren't intended to be currencies. Some of them are tokens, some of them are assets, some of them just get, if you hold one of these tokens or, whatever, it gives you access to a smart contract system that then does some computation for you, etc. So it's not something that would, be traded on a foreign exchange level as such. I don't even think, just to sort of go a bit further on that, I don't even think Bitcoin is a good currency.